Hello everyone, and welcome to the 127th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Fire Lord Ozai from Avatar: The Last Airbender. A ruthless megalomaniac hell-bent on world domination, Fire Lord Ozai is the personification of all the evil present within the Fire Nation and its sordid history. A man who nearly brought the world to heel under the weight of his overwhelming destructive power. In this video, we're going to first explore the circumstances that led to the development of Ozai's position as Fire Lord, briefly discussing the history of the Fire Nation as a whole, before we move on to discuss the intricacies of his character. But before we begin, let's first talk about our sponsor for this video, Babbel. Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world. They offer a wide array of comprehensive lessons that help you reach your language goals. And they offer perhaps the most crucial tool when it comes to achieving fluency, real-life conversations with native speakers. This is one of the greatest perks that comes with using Babbel, and it's easy to get started with daily lessons that will have you speaking a new language in only 3 weeks. Babbel offers a ton of languages to choose from, as well as several different subscriptions, like their lifetime subscription. I'm continuing my journey through the French language, and I definitely say that Babbel has improved my pronunciation.
Raconte-moi ton enfance.
Raconte-moi ton enfance.
Quoi de neuf, Antoine?
Quoi de neuf, Antoine?
Le directeur était souvent épuisé.
Le directeur était souvent épuisé. Summer is fast approaching, and there'll be plenty of new people to meet and converse with. And right now you can get ahead of the game with Babbel by clicking the link down in the description, where you can get up to 60% off of your subscription. Again, that's up to 60% off of your subscription to Babbel by clicking the link down below. Thank you, Babbel, for sponsoring this video. Now without further ado, let's begin. In the age before the Avatar, the first firebenders, like all humans during this time period, lived on a lion turtle, a great beast that protected them from the dangers of the spirit wilds, that is, the rest of the lands of the earth that were entirely occupied by spirits. After Wan, who would become the first Avatar, was banished from this city, many of its denizens chose to follow suit once they learned he had survived the wilds for an extended period on his own, a feat that no one at that point in time had managed to accomplish. They did so to escape the autocratic rule of the Chu family, who dominated the city with an iron fist and forced many of its less fortunate citizens to languish in poverty. Unlike Wan, though, who used the warmth of fire to defend and invigorate, upon leaving the city and forging their own path, this group of rebellious colonists would seek to decimate their new environment, using their fire to dominate and control, never attempting to understand the spirits that assailed them in favor of destroying them for their own gain. Both the Chu family and these colonists set the stage for two of the most defining characteristics of the Fire Nation and its royal family: autocratic rule and violent, expansionist tendencies. Following the Avatar's sealing of Vaatu, the world entered a state of constant warfare as the spirits returned to their realm, and it was from these wars that the nations of the world as we know it began to form. However, the actions of the colonials and the Chu family were themes that remained more or less consistent throughout the entire history of the Fire Nation, save within the Sun Warrior culture, which we can assume is a branch of people descended from these colonists or other city dwellers that chose to embrace their environment rather than destroy it. But for most of its history, the Fire Islands were marked with strife and struggle, as the lines of society were now drawn between clan and tribe, the machinations of warlords serving as a constant threat. Long after the Avatar made his mark on the world, a particularly brutal warlord named Taz became the dominant power in the Fire Islands, and as reigning lord, he demanded tribute from all who suffered under his rule, even going so far as to abduct children from a village that refused to pay tribute to him, an act which caused their slain mothers to revive themselves as the Kamurikage, dark spirits that would plague these proto-fire lords until the unification of the nation under one rule. Eventually, that's just what happened, as Taz's success in uniting a portion of the islands would cause others to attempt to mimic his success, and before long, the first Fire Lord came into being, and under his rule, the Fire Islands became one nation, united under one man and one family. However, that wouldn't be the end of the struggle between the multiple clans of the Fire Nation, and for centuries following its founding, these clans, now reorganized into nobles, would skirmish and squabble amongst themselves on a near constant basis. This ensured that their people would continue to perpetrate the legacy of their ancestors, and the following centuries would be marked with wars both civil and proper. fortunately for not just the Fire Nation, but the world at large. After the death of Avatar Kyoshi, a lasting peace was enjoyed by all, and through prosperity, a golden age of philosophy, technology, and science flourished. The Fire Nation stood to benefit the most from this renaissance, as due to their command of the element necessary for industrialization, they quickly developed new revolutionary technology that rapidly grew their wealth and power. At the zenith of their progress, a man who would forever alter the fabric of society was born into the royal family, Sozin. Sozin recognized the overwhelming technological prowess and prosperity of his nation from an early age, and after his ascension to Fire Lord, he desired to share that prosperity with the rest of the world through conquest. For a time, his ambitions were quelled by Avatar Roku, but after betraying his estranged best friend and leaving him to die, Sozin put his plans into action and started a war that would last 100 years. Now, whether or not Sozin was naive and truly believed that a Fire Nation-dominated world would bring prosperity to all, or he was simply hiding his true desire for power behind idealism, is unknown. But considering he was more than happy to eliminate an entire people, the air nomads, in order to make his dreams a reality, I think we can lean towards his ambitions being less than benevolent. Sozin would command this war for 20 years, and upon his death, his son Azulon would do much the same for another 75, during which time the Southern Water Tribe was nearly annihilated, and the Earth Kingdom suffered territorial losses in the name of Fire Nation colonization. This long history of conflict and domination would culminate in the rule of Sozin's grandson and the subject of our video, Ozai, a man who in many ways proved to be the perfect embodiment of the imperialistic ambitions of his forefathers. We're given a small account of Ozai's youth from Iroh in the book Legacy of the Fire Nation, which I'll read for you now. From the day Ozai could crawl, the fire in him burned bright. He was stubborn and impatient. It seemed like nothing could slow him down, not even me. As we grew up, we grew competitive, as brothers do, but his ambition was greater than my own. We would fight like warriors over games of Paisho, where he would grow frustrated and, in fits of rage, flip the board, spilling the pieces in the air and often burning them. At first, anyone could dismiss his fury as little more than temper tantrums, but I worried it was something worse than just an impetuous heart. In school, he showed ruthlessness that I envied for a time, but the older we got, the clearer it was for me to see that one day we would all get burned. The fire in our people, the fire in Ozai, has the ability to provide warmth, inspire community, and sharpen the spirit. However, when unbidden and untampered, it will destroy, break, and lay waste to the worlds of man. When I looked in my brother's eyes, there was only fire and ash, and in his chest, a heart of ice. Iroh couldn't have been more right about his brother. As time went on, Ozai proved to be more ruthless and cold-hearted than any other member of the family who had come before him. Our first taste of his barbarity was found in his marriage to Ursa. On the advice of the Fire Sages, Fire Lord Azulon sought to create a firebender of unrivaled power by mixing the bloodlines of Avatar Roku and the royal family. This desire brought him to Ursa, Roku's great-granddaughter, and to accomplish this goal, he bound her to Ozai in marriage against her will. While initially presented as somewhat kind-hearted, Ozai quickly showed his true colors by expressing his desire to control his new wife, telling her on the night of their marriage that her duty was now to the Fire Nation, the royal family, and more importantly, to him, and so she would need to shed all aspects of her former life, including her contact with her parents. Ozai would prove to be a controlling and commanding husband, going so far as to collect any letters that Ursa attempted to send back home to her former lover, Ikem, and he even organized the attempted assassination of Ikem after he read a letter where Ursa claimed that Zuko wasn't in fact Ozai's son, but Ikem's. This proved to be false, and Ozai was aware that it was false, but perhaps because of his anger at his wife in this moment, Ozai began to mistreat Zuko further than he likely already had, as when Zuko was born, he initially wanted to cast him out from the palace because he didn't show any signs of being a bender, something that Ozai found disgraceful for a member of the royal family. But he was persuaded by Ursa and the Fire Sages to quell his rage and spare his life. Despite knowing that his son was in fact his own, Ozai still chose to treat Zuko as the son of a treacherous dog, as he put it, all to spite his wife, who had tried to hurt him by claiming he wasn't his own. A horrid act of cruelty towards a child undeserving of his wrath. It should be noted though, that when Azulon requested that Ozai kill Zuko as punishment for his attempt to usurp his brother following Luten's demise, Ozai told Ursa that he would do so when Zuko was sleeping, declaring himself to be a merciful man. A moment of empathy from an otherwise wholly unempathetic man. However, that's about as far as his empathy reaches, and it was in this moment that Ozai conspired with Ursa to murder Azulon so she might save her son and he take the throne, though Zuko still suffered his ire and the barbaric scarring of his face by his hand after he spoke out of turn at a war meeting. Not to mention that he nearly killed Zuko during the Day of Black Sun when he shot a bolt of lightning at him. But it's this scarring that gives us an even greater insight into the fuel for Ozai's fire. Power. Power is all that Ozai has ever cared about, and when Zuko is confronting him during the eclipse and asks him how he could challenge a 13-year-old boy to an Agni Kai, Ozai responds that it was to teach him respect, and when Zuko counters by saying that it was cruel and wrong, Ozai remarks that he's learned nothing. While Ozai certainly meant to instill fear into his son, and thus respect for him, by teaching him this brutal lesson, he had also hoped to show Zuko what he believes to be the one truth of the world, that might makes right, and it is through power that one can enforce their will onto anyone and anything, and those who cannot, like the air nomads, do not deserve to live in a world dominated by the strong. This notion is quite prevalent in his reign as Fire Lord, as his tenure as ruler of the Fire Nation marked 5 years of increased warfare that nearly trumped all the previous actions that the Fire Nation took in the past 100 years. It's in this capacity as Fire Lord that most of you are familiar with Ozai, and from the few times we see him during this series, we're treated to a man with incredible presence and force of will, a no-nonsense attitude, and a heart of stone. Demanding respect and subservience from all who surround him, Ozai commanded absolute power within the Fire Nation and beyond, his citizens adoring him and his soldiers fanatically loyal. His imposition of his will onto his own populace and enactment of a cult of personality that went far beyond the worship of previous Fire Lords marked his rule as the most autocratic and authoritarian yet. But for all his cruelty and barbarity during the 5 years of his reign, nothing would compare to the culmination of all his designs on the day Sozin's comet returned. After receiving counsel from Zuko during a war meeting where he stated that the Earth Kingdom would never truly submit to his rule, he received counter-advice from Azula in the form of her statement that they should burn the Earth Kingdom to the ground, and with the example that his grandfather set when he committed genocide against the air nomads, Ozai vowed to do just that. Why? Because that would allow him to be the supreme ruler of the world, as what chance did the water tribes of the north or south, or the stragglers left unburnt, stand against the overwhelming might of a near unchallenged Fire Nation? Declaring himself the Phoenix King, Ozai, replete with extravagant and ornate regalia, set out to birth the world anew in flame with his fleet of airships, and in a display of terrifying force, Ozai and his minions scorched every square inch of land in their path, all life perishing beneath their flames. With this plan put into action, Ozai marked himself as a man beyond that of a conquering ruler, showing himself as a megalomaniac of genocidal proportions who had not a shred of mercy in his person. A man that would have made his murderous progenitor quite proud, a man who believed in what we call the divine right of kings, that divinity presented to him in an act of providence when Aang engaged him during his invasion. However, after a devastating battle, Ozai was stopped, and after being reduced to a shadow of his former glory, we're shown a man whose pride and force of will remained relatively intact. Though we were shown a glimpse of his talents as a manipulator during his attempt to bait Zuko into fighting him during the eclipse when he mentioned his mother, Ozai, lacking the power of a firebender, brings this skill to bear in force. When Zuko is having trouble with the decolonization plan that was enacted by Earth King Kuei and Aang, he turns to his father, and through these conversations, we're given more from Ozai to support his overall power-centric ideology. Here, he regales Zuko with a tale about his desire to save a turtle crab from a hawk during one of their vacations to Ember Island. Zuko saved the crab from the hawk, but in that moment, he saw that the hawk would lose its meal if he saved the crab, condemning it to starve. Zuko, in his indecision, was unaware of the giant wave heading his way, and he was carried out to the ocean, nearly drowning before Ozai saved him. Now normally, this would be a powerful lesson in indecision, as indecisiveness can sometimes be worse than making the wrong decision, as who knows what the consequence of your inaction in any given scenario might be. While Ozai was attempting to impart this lesson on Zuko, he more so wanted to make yet another point about power and the right that a king has to do as he wishes. As when Zuko returned the next day to answer his query, Ozai claimed that whatever Zuko chooses in any given situation is right simply by virtue of his position as Fire Lord. This nearly caused Zuko to reignite the conflict between the Earth Kingdom and the Fire Nation, and the advice he received from his father here could have very well sent him down the same path as his forebearers. Fortunately, it didn't, but this still shows the intelligence of Ozai, a man who even behind bars is able to influence an entire nation through words alone. No matter his skill and force of will though, Ozai is above all a repugnant creature, and in our last glimpse of him, we're shown just how black-hearted he is. When Ursa returns to the Fire Nation and faces Ozai for the final time, he spits venom at her, stating that he would fulfill his promise of ending her and everyone she ever loved. But just as Ursa said, he was a small man with a smaller heart, one that had no room for anyone, not even himself. And I'm sure even till his end, he remained a miserable man, filled with anger and hate, one who was utterly alone in the bed of dark flames that he inhabited. But who knows what the influence of Ozai may have brought during his imprisonment, as there emerged an organization dedicated to reinstating his rule and the glory of the Fire Nation, the new Ozai Society. And though they were foiled, the residual influence of a man who commanded absolute power over millions of people is not to be underestimated. And at this uncertain end, who was Fire Lord Ozai? He was a man who inherited the enormous power of a dynasty that desired to dominate the world. Born with ambition, a magnanimous will, and the might of a powerful firebender, Ozai would absorb all the domineering aspects of his family and people that they had developed over thousands of years, and through him, the destructive aspects of fire nearly granted him absolute power over the world and all who lived in it. Ruthless, brutal, and nearly unmerciful, Fire Lord Ozai was an example of a man with primal traits who was given access to near ultimate power. And though he and the men who led before him inflicted horrible wounds on the world, wounds can heal, and time will pass, and the memory of a man who would bathe the world in fire for his own sake will fade just as Ozai did, languishing in a dark cell, alone, cold, and filled with evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Ozai? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, and to my patrons, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and Reddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.